Okay, well, welcome everyone. I am Aaron Johnson, the Executive Director of the American Institute of Professional Geologists. I would like to welcome you today to this special edition of the AIPG Lunch and Earn series. A couple of very quick bookkeeping notes. If you're taking this webinar for continuing education credit, you'll receive a certificate at the same email address that you used to register for the seminar, for the webinar. It will be automatically generated, and we will get that out to you as quickly as possible. If you're taking this for continuing education credit for your registration in New York State, you will need to complete a post-webinar assessment. It's 5 questions. You need to answer 4 of those questions correctly. You can take it as many times as you like. We'll leave it open for about half an hour, and we will place the link to that assessment in the chat when we get to the end of the webinar. So please remember to go to the chat. I'll also try to remind you as well when we get to the end of the webinar. Taking care of that business, it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Abani Samal today. Abani holds a PhD from Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, along with a master's degree from Imperial College in London and a mineral exploration degree from IIT in Dhanbad, India. He's been practicing mining geology and deposit evaluation for nearly 30 years. He's also the principal and owner of GeoGlobal LLC and provides consulting services to exploration and mining companies, government agencies, and financial institutions worldwide. He specializes in mineral resource estimation, applied geostatistics, risk assessment, and mine mill reconciliation. He serves on the editorial boards of 2 international scientific journals, both the Mining, Metallurgy, and Exploration Journal and the Natural Resources Research Journal. Dr. Samal is a CPG with the American Institute of Professional Geologists, a fellow and registered member of SME, and a member of many other national and international professional societies such as CIM, SEG, or SAIMM. It is my pleasure to welcome him today. I'm very excited to hear what he has to tell us about the role that a CP or QP plays in the mineral estimation and evaluation world. Dr. Samal, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate this introduction. Like you mentioned, and I am a CPG with AIPG. I just remembered that this is my 18th year with as a CPG with AIPG, and this is my 22nd year with SME. I started with SME as a member. Now, this Aaron, thanks for that introduction. What we're going to talk today is there's the role of a geologist as a competent person in reporting exploration results and mineral resources. What I'll talk today is basically what is reported, what we really mean by reporting, and what are we actually reporting there actually. And then some definitions and terminology that's important for reporting purposes, and also then talk about CP. People have questions about qualifications and responsibilities. I'll try to keep the presentation and up to maybe 35 minutes or something, and leave enough time for Q&A. Before I start, just to know that every slide I have my email ID there at the bottom. If you want to, you can always communicate with me. That's my email ID, arsamal@geoglobal.co. I'll also leave that email ID with you guys in the last slide. Now, what exactly reporting means? This is just an example. This is just an introduction to reporting. That really means that these are publications of reports, often known as public reports, that are prepared for informing current investors or potential investors and their advisors on exploration results, mineral resources, and reserves. That's what reporting means, where the CP is actually signing off. Now, some examples in here. Sometimes is filed through the stock exchanges. CEDAR in Canadian, EDGAR system is in US. In Australia, it's through the Australian Stock Exchange, ASX. On the right hand side of my slide, is an example of a 43101 compliant report that I published some times ago. So I could just pull my reports as an example. You will see that in a couple of slides too. These reports, what I mean by reports is they are technical reports. They can be annual or quarterly company reports, press releases, and information and memoranda, all things like that, all these documents that requires a CPs to review or sign up or write or sign up because competent person was involved, in producing the main report, from which this such press releases may have actually gotten some information through. There are also non-public reports. These are often the reports meant for private companies or by private companies. These are exploration and mining companies who are private entities or certain government entities. The picture that you're seeing in this slide is a report that I co-authored with a bunch of people for a World Bank financed project that I led with other people and submitted to government of Nigeria. Like I said, it's a World Bank funded project, and through various agencies, it was very complicated for me to handle the whole team there and lead the publication of this report. Now, this is meant for a government agency, but it's not actually. You won't find that this report in public domain. That means through the stock exchanges you can find them. But this is an example of the reports where, even though it's not filed through any stock exchanges, still the reports are authored by a CP and treated as a CP report. So the responsibility is the same. Here is another one. This is another extreme of the report. The previous slide that I showed you is a mega project, a gigantic report. I'm talking about a few hundred pages of reports, just reporting the exploration results of iron ore resources in that country. And in this one, what we are seeing here is a much smaller exploration project. Again, I authored it, published in 2022, but it's not a public report. It's meant for a private investors. So why we need these reports, or why these reports are written? Because mining is an international business. Okay, that's why I want actually all the competent persons, in this webinar, joining this webinar, or who want to be a competent person, must understand that mining is an international business. That means if we actually sign off on a report today, this is possible that your report is actually also shared worldwide, because investors coming from entire world, and they're actually trading in different stock exchanges today. On the right hand side of this slide, that you see that in 2015, this is a snapshot from 2015. How many countries actually participated in these are major countries actually, or major regions of the world. They came to Toronto stock exchanges to for raising funds. These are only mining companies. Even though Canadian companies are the largest numbers in here, but we also see from Russia. We also see from companies coming from Asia in here. Just a second. Asia and also a company from Middle East. So it's an international business. There's another thing also. We know that mining industry is based on depleting resources, depleting mineral assets. That means once we mine it, it's gone. We cannot bring it back to the same location. And when we go and make decisions on mining, we always have an imperfect information about what we're going to mine, how much material we're going to mine, all the different information. These is actually not complete yet. So so this is actually, it is a part of the risk factor that is always associated with mining projects. It's typical to our world, that is mining industry. So why we need a CP? The investment decisions in mining industry. I underline that word, investment decisions in mining industry requires a clear communication of risks. And it depends on the trust and confidence of the investors and other stakeholders for its financial and operational well-being. What really that again, the second sentence means that an investor already looks for a source where it extracts the information and gets educated, then makes an informed decision, and thinking that his investment is safe. That's kind of the role of the CP report. And now you can imagine what's the kind of responsibility that we have as a CP. Now, just a little bit about where the computer person reports are now being used in the world. There are 15 countries that are members of CRISCO. I give the website there, crisco.com, where you will see that these are 15 members where all the codes that we know, like in Canada, we know NI 43101. In Australasia, it's actually JOT. In Brazil, recently CBRR becoming very popular. In the United States, we have SK 1300. These are the members of CRISCO. So if you are really interested, please go to the website there and understand what CRISCO template means. All the codes that we use today and all the CPs, we need to understand that the definition in these codes are coming from the CRISCO template. And CRISCO template is free, is freely downloadable. Please go ahead and do that after the webinar if you like. Again, this is a system made for public reporting of exploration results, mineral resources, and reserve, and it can happen in any part of the world. Now, the three pillars of CP reports: transparency, materiality, and competency. And you will see in my rest of the presentation, I'll be stressing on those three things, in our work, how actually, how these three pillars has to be always there for a good CP report. I mean, by good, I mean a reliable CP report. That is a report on which investors really are taking decisions or making their informed decisions. Transparency means sufficient and clearly presented data and information. Sufficient, okay, and clearly presented. That means no ambiguity. Please clearly say what you know. That means if I don't understand, if the project doesn't have a QA/QC SOP, please state that. Clearly say that. Last summer, I did a project where as a CP for geology part, not the resource part, that you all probably know that I'm a resource guy. I'm a geologist and geostatistician. In this project, I was CP for geology. I had to tell them that, look, guys, this is a private entity. I know where my reports are going. You don't have the POPs and the remaining parts of the drill codes you acquired from your, from the drill codes coming from the previous owners. You don't have them. And I have to clearly write it. I did it. Okay, clearly state actually what you see. And also at the same time, it's not always highlighting the risk factors. Always also mention that it's clearly, investors should see there is sufficient information and clearly presented benefits of acquiring a project or investing in a project. You may be working for a large mining company. Your corporate is the financier. So when we are working on in a project as CP, it becomes our responsibility to inform both sides, risk and benefits, and with only relevant information has to be presented. Okay, I'll give you some examples as we move on. And relevant information should be presented which are useful in making decision process. Well, I'll give a hypothetical example. I'm sitting in Salt Lake City. If I'm going south of my, my town here, there are a lot of, skarn deposits. So if I'm signed up, I'm working on one of the skarn deposits, I should be writing the report and putting those data and information that will help the potential investor to make decisions on those deposits. What is irrelevant here is to say that, look, this is only a couple hundred miles from Bingham Canyon. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant to say that we're next to the national parks, right? Only relevant information should be there. And competency is another 1/3 of the CP report. That means who is CP, right? What is his qualification? Is it suitably qualified? That means that relates to actually your academic training, what kind of degrees that we have, and what kind of experience both we have. It's not replaceable. You can't exactly replace the experience, with the academic qualification. It's both. There are only in my 20 years, more than 20 years in the industry, I've seen only 2 cases where the mining engineer wasn't a trained mining engineer. He got a degree in mechanical engineering, but he took like 23 or 24 different courses in mining engineering after he graduated, but never got a degree in mining engineering. So he puts those degrees when he signs off as a CP for that project. This was an iron ore project in Canada. Now, this is exactly why the CP reports are highly favored by financial institutions, because they know the guys or the group of people who are acting as a CP, they're properly qualified. They have the relevant experiences to make a report. And they know that they're also following a code, and we just discuss about NI 43-101, JORC, in different parts of the world. There are different codes and guidelines. We're following one of them. When both of these things are matched, you are using a standard code, and you are acting as a CP, and you have proper qualification. That's what the investors like. So various studies happen. We're just switching to more technical items in this presentation. We know that these are the, when we develop a project, we start with the exploration, then a little bit more advanced exploration. Then we're making the planning and stuff. In this, when I say advanced exploration, this period we're doing all different studies, and then also going into construction. Actually, at that time we're doing the planning, all the mine planning and stuff. Then we're going into mining, going into closure at the end. So what happens during this phase, if we just focus up to mining, we do various studies. Scoping studies are, in Canadian terms, PEA, preliminary economic assessment. These are the preliminary studies that we do. Before that also, when the preliminary exploration happens, we also produce some other reports. Well, I'll come to that in next slide. Then going into pre-feasibility study is an extensive study. Most extensive study is pre-feasibility study. Then going into feasibility study. So these are the studies that we do in that order. Why? Because as we move from scoping study to feasibility study through pre-feasibility study, the definition changes. The definition here, what I mean by that is, at the preliminary exploration stage, we have mineralization or discovery, or we don't actually going into mineral resources and moving to reserve. So definitions change. With that definition changes, with the progression in the studies, also risk decreases. That is why we do the studies. As we do the studies, let's focus up to mining. These 4 stages in here. What we do publish, actually, we publish technical reports, which can be just exploration results. No resources in there. They are kind of, those reports happen mostly in this exploration stage, in this stage actually here. And beyond that, here is one area where we have technical reports and also studies. Kind of we're starting the PEA, or before the PEA, we may have technical reports, right? Then we have studies based on exploration and the resource and reserve. Those are the items that we report. In the exploration results, we don't have the resource and reserve. All right, we'll go into a little more details about that. Common terminology that is used, I think that kind of becomes, every time I review a report or review a QP's work, or do myself act as a QP or CP, competent person or qualified person are the same. It's just used in different ways in different parts of the world, just so that you know. When I say QP or CP, they mean the same thing. So common terminology here as the resource and reserve, Also, we should not actually forget that, we also report exploration results. I just showed you 2 examples there where we do actually report exploration results. When we move from resources through exploration results to resource, there is a filter there. It's called reasonable prospect for eventual economic extraction. I'll also explain that in a slide or two. What really means part of the exploration results can become resources. When we do the resources, is based on the geological confidence that we have in those resources. Okay, and so as we move from inferred resources to measured resources, our geological confidence really increases. As we move from resource to reserve, these are the factors that we consider is called modifying factors. I'll also discuss a little bit about the difference between modifying factors and AIPG criteria in a slide. This is a very wordy slide. These are the definitions, so I cannot cut it. I'm going to talk about only the highlighted or underlined words in here. When we have or the occurrences of mineral, that means we discover it, right? When it's a mineral deposit, that means that the size and the quality and quantity comes to our mind. When you say, well, we have a gold deposit in southern Nevada, that means we have, when it's a deposit, that means we kind of have an idea. It has an economic potential. Otherwise, we won't invest it, right? We won't actually put money to drill it even. So it has to have a size and the quality. Without that, you don't have economic potential. But now going from the resource to deposit to resource, at this time we're using AIPG criteria to justify or to find out and to quantify what is the amount of the material that we thought as a deposit, we defined as a deposit. What is the portion of that material that can become resource, and that is eventually will be actually economic. It has an economic potential, but sometimes in the future, when we say reserve, that is economically mineable in current time, in a foreseeable future that includes this year, right? So in next 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years, whatever that is using the current data. Okay, and for that reason, we need a rigorous study that is either pre-feasibility or feasibility level study. So you cannot do the feasibility level study without pre-feasibility. But I say or because there has been cases where projects go straight to pre-feasibility study. That means they don't really bypass the pre-feasibility study, but the financing for those studies in designed in such a way from the PEA to feasibility study, they go straight and take a longer time in between. They do carry out the works that is of pre-feasibility level. It's just not a report published that time. Okay, so that's why this R is. Otherwise, a feasibility study always requires a pre-feasibility level work there. Okay, the scoping study must not be used for the reserve. So if you have a reserve, you have to have a minimum PFS, and if you complete a PFS, you have to have reserve. You understand exactly how actually these two are linked. In today's world, you cannot report a PFS without reporting reserve, and you cannot report reserve without showing that you have done a pre-feasibility level study, and it has to be reporting study. It's not that you said so, or not a CP actually said so. Now, what do we really disclose or report in these studies? In these reports as a CP, exploration results. These are exploration data, including drilling results, sample analysis, QA/QC, all different things that gives confidence to the reader. In this case, can be investors or their advisors, saying the data generated from this project are reliable. If you need a picture, please put that picture in it. If you need a diagram, please do that. Again, sufficient information to make a reasonable, an informed decision, and only relevant information. That in the picture that you see here, after I advised this project, this is a Nigerian exploration project. who is drilling it, when you drill it, please put a cap. So I take a picture and stick that in my report. This is shows that in so-and-so location, so-and-so drill hole was drilled. So an investor can potentially visit that site sometimes in the future and cross-check them. And this shows that the second picture shows that the type of the outcrop that you can see on the slide on the site if you go there. The third picture, so this is an operating mine in Brazil. It's a very famous, pretty large operating mine, but they're doing a brownfield exploration. What kind of trenching they're doing? What kind of equipment they're using? When by I mean a CPA writing that report must explain using these graphics and write the story so in a way that the investor really looks at it and understands clearly what's going on in that site and only relevant information, right? You may have taken a lot of pictures in this slide, beautiful minerals that are not relevant probably, right? So it's important to understand what goes into the report. Now, resources, like I said, from the mineralization, from the deposit, we're taking only subset of that information, that material is becoming resources. They, this part of the deposit that meets the criteria for reasonable prospect for eventual economic extraction. Reasonable prospect means these are the group of technical and economic criteria that impacts the extraction of the mineral deposit. So when you plan about economically extracting, that means mining, you have to consider all these criteria. This has to be reasonable, okay? And there's a way to test that. And eventual means in the foreseeable future. As humans, we can only foresee few generations of our lifespan. Okay, I'll give an example. An European iron ore deposit. I worked on it, I think, in 2009 to 2011, a couple of years on that project. They're trying to upgrade this iron ore mine, compliant to, again, it's an East European project, to kind of an American or Canadian style reporting. It took us a lot of steps to get there, but we really could not finish it. We could not really put all the material they wanted to report as the resources. I said they wanted. Yes, the company wanted to put all this material in the resources. You know why? Because for iron ore, we as a technical group of 7 or 8 people. I was the lead geologist there with 2 other geologists. Were three people working on the geology side, and mining engineers, process engineers. We worked together. We could not actually predict this iron ore can be mined 100 years after, or even 50 years after. Right now is the right example. How many cars you see actually, they have replaced the metals with plastics, right? How do you predict definitely what is the human demand for steel is going to be? Yes, steel will be used, iron ore will be used, but we couldn't really predict more than probably 50 years or 100 years. There was some timeline beyond which justified that iron ore will be used in the same way as we did in that year. So again, there was technical feasibility too. How do you know what kind of equipment will be available 10 years after? We don't know, because there's a rapid change in that space too. So you need to be very careful how we're predicting. Right, right now we talk a lot about lithium and nickel. Nickel has been always in the use, but now the really high price of nickel, is it really predictable that the price will be this high in 3 to 5 years? We don't know. We really don't know. So these are very short-term projections we have to do for certain commodities. They're considered high-price commodities today. For gold, maybe we're comfortable. Here's a gold example where I was a CP. Here in this example, what you were seeing, actually, I did a block model in here. There's some certain geological domains. The yellow blocks that you see So, well, these are potential for resources. Now, I used a mining engineer with 20 years plus experience in surface mining scenario. He did a pit, a optimal pit using some other software tools. I said, okay, what is the largest pit you can get actually using rolling average prices for last 5 years, or what you can predict in next 3 years? Have a look, and and given your current condition of the company. So he put a pit shell, and that looked like that light blue color pit shell. In that case, what we did is not what I said. Actually, what we did there, we only reported the blocks within that pit shell are resources. The remaining blocks, they're still there. There's no loss of it. But when it goes to public report, in the report that is published, we put this is the amount of resource that we can find in using current criteria. This pit shell is an example of the meeting the AIPG criteria in a surface mine scenario. The rest of the material is still there. They will be upgraded sometimes in the future if we put enough other criteria that we couldn't meet today in the future time. In an underground scenario, this is a uranium project from Asia. Here, actually, what we use actually a mine stope optimization tool. What that does actually says, well, there are uranium mineralization in this area, that's fine, but there are certain areas actually, in this project, we found certain mineralization in this area, they're mineralized, not a problem, but we don't have access there. That means we cannot really mine it in next 10 to 15 years or something like that. They didn't have any budget there. The company didn't even want to do that. Okay, all this area, then what we're doing here is, okay, these are mineralization for sure. Sometimes in the future, there will be probably resources, maybe not, because we cannot meet the reasonable prospect for eventual economic extraction criteria. That's underground scenario. Now, I said, there are three categories of resources. When you talk about, again, this slide has a lot of text, just focus on the highlighted, like the bold letters or underlined letters there, or the words there. This info resources decision is made based on limited geological evidences and sampling. Limited. That's why it's sufficient to imply, but not verify the geological continuity. You can say, okay, there is a 50% probability for achieving the success in this project. That's info resource. That's why you see the PEA or the scoping studies can be entirely based on the info resources. That just tells you there's a 50% or 40%, 40 to 50% chance of success if we, but it's worth, at the end of the study, we're making decision whether we go for PFS or not. At the end of the PFS, that's a whole different scenario. Now, info resources are of lower level confidence than indicator resources. And going back to going to the indicator resources, they are, of course, higher confidence than info resources. It's because it has sufficient confidence to allow application of modifying factors. Remember, the modifying factors are applied on the resources, those are indicated or measured resources, to convert part of that into reserve. That's mineable. We're saying in the future is mineable, this will be reserve is mineable. To make that decision, it becomes a responsibility of CP to, I say, properly classify the resources, because once you make the indicator resources, that is, it becomes a candidate for reserve. And remember some of the words I am highlighting by bold, using bold letters there. In the last bullet point in this slide is the geological framework can be confidently interpreted. In the previous slide, it wasn't, confident wasn't used. These are definitions. It's not made up words there. So, use the word like sufficient to assume geological and great continuity. So those kind of words really come to indicate research, because it can become the reserve. Now, going to measure resources, this is the highest confidence. That's why we say, well, it has sufficient confidence to allow application of modifying factors. Second bullet point also is stresses more. There it says, well, the geological evidence that we had actually, in the info resources based on assumptions, during indicated in the indicated resources where there some assumptions are mostly tested. Now the geological evidence are derived from detailed and reliable exploration and sampling testing. There's no assumption here. There'll be very minimal, okay, or no assumption. This has to be tested, and it's sufficient to confirm. This is a very strong word, confirm geological and grade continuity. So when you are signing up on a major resource, it becomes a responsibility of a CP to confirm that do I have enough confidence to confirm the geological continuity. Again, just kind of summarizing what I talked in the resource classification. These are three different types of classification. High level sorry, major resources has higher level of confidence than the indicated resources or uninformed resources. In that order, it may be converted into proven reserve to probable reserve. That means, look at this slide, this picture in here. This is a common figure in any code that you use. Today in the world, there are 15 different codes. Last code came last year was from Philippines. But if you look at just the major codes, it may be JORC from Australia, NI 4311 from Canada, our SK1300 in US. All these codes have this figure as figure 1. South African IMM has 2 figures. You have to look at the second figure from a different angle. So indicated resources, part of the indicated resources can be converted into probable reserve if that part of resource meets all the criteria that's listed under modifying factors. Now, however, the major resources, part of the major resources can be proven reserves and probable reserve. Now, what you cannot do with indicated to proven reserve, you cannot do that. You cannot convert part of the indicated resources into proven reserve. Now, the question I always get, do I have to have proven reserve and how much? No, you don't have to have proven reserve. It all entirely depends on the company and the strategy and the investors that what they require. Just remember, these are the rules by which actually the CPs actually are guided by, and they classify the resources like that. Okay. Selection of the resource categories. Again, there are 3 categories of resources. The main thing to take away from this slide is it is based on the resource classification is based on the skilled judgment. These 2 words are very important. You got to be skilled, and you should be able to make a judgment by the CP. Okay. And the reserve, I won't talk much about reserve because this is meant for geologists. Actually, mineral reserve is economically viable part of the resources, right? The reserve, this portion is economically feasible. Resources, they have economical potential for the future. Okay, and the reserve includes various factors like dilution. It includes the losses and all different things, and all those criteria comes up. To meet all the criteria, we have to have a very rigorous study, either PFS or FS. Just remember those guys who are taking quizzes actually. And on this resource classification, please remember those things. What is reasonable prospect for eventual economic extraction and modifying factor? They're kind of similar criteria, but RPEE they are basically reasonable assumptions for the future. Modified factors, now they are proven numbers, the real numbers. These are assumptions, reasonable assumptions. Modifying factors are real. These, when you say reserve, that means you are saying that is mineable. That means if I borrow money and put a mining project, I am promising the investor that he will get back the money after we mine it for some time. Okay. Now coming to the competent persons. This is a slide I borrowed from the Crisco chairman a couple of years ago. One thing to highlight here, of course, he has to be an industry professional. That means he has worked for a few years. member of a recognized professional organization. AIPG is an RPO in at least in Canada, Australia, I believe in South Africa too. So it's an RPO, recognized RPO. I maintain two memberships. One is the AIPG CPG, another one is registered member of SME. Now, it has a minimum years of relevant experience. That's very key. And this last point in this slide is kind of your litmus test. A CP should always say, the work that I did or signed up, I put my name in there, I signed on that. Can it stand the test by my peers and demonstrate the competence of the competence of me in those commodity and type of deposit? You may have actually heard me talking about in different forums about the relevant experience of a CP is not a mine, not a commodity, or rather a style of mineralization. Please look at these codes. They say your experience has to be on the style of mineralization. That means it's a sedimentary, or it's igneous, or it's a VMS, or it's a vein type deposit, all that, okay? Just a comparison of different qualifications of the CPs worldwide. The two countries, Brazil and US, require 3 years of minimum years of Aaron says AIPG ROPO in Canada with Crisco, including pork, jork, and samal. That's fantastic. So Brazil and SME, the US, they require 3 years of positions of responsibility. Let me clarify. Positions of responsibility doesn't mean your designation as a senior geologist or principal geologist or general manager. What that means that, remember I highlighted the two words there, you should be able to make decisions, right? A CP has a responsibility of making decisions. You should be able to make independent decisions. That's what it means. If he's a senior geologist, he makes a decision in a company, he's also CP in another company. I have seen people going as a manager, they do not become CPs. And they really didn't have the CP qualifications. The rest of the things, if you guys have more questions, I can cover during Q&A session on this slide. What really relevant experience means, a CP signing up on exploration results should have training and experience in exploration, okay? A CP signing up for mine planning and reserve estimation is expected to have education training in those areas. That's really a mining engineer, right? A geologist with significant experience in ore control may not have sufficient experience in exploration and resource estimation. So he is not quite qualified to, to sign off on the report on the, like a resource estimated resources. Maybe he's actually able to just sign off as a contributing CP in certain companies that do that, in an operating mine where he has been working for the last 2 decades or something. In my case, it's an example, okay, I always disclose like my professional society, CPG with AIPG and registered member of SME. The fellow of SCG doesn't give me the license to become a competent person, but I disclose that. What are my my affiliation with ROPOs or recognized professional organizations. And who is my employer, who I work with, and if the employer is actually valid, and all different types of things. And then also what I can do, right? We have experience in type of projects and also in different areas: exploration, resource estimation, applied geostatistics and risk analysis, mine to mill reconciliation. Those are my technical areas, okay? Types of projects what I have done. So people can make decisions on where I can become a CP or not. Last few slides, role of a competent person. Please take it very seriously. You're preparing a competent person report. I already discussed what those reports are. Exercising judgments in providing external information. When particularly you are doing a PEA or a scoping study type of work, please make sure that the information that you are borrowing from another project, make sure that you are happy with it based on your experience. Many times I have actually consulted with another CP, say, hey, I don't have the qualification. Please you tell me, and your name will be showing in my report. You need to be clearly telling this. And guess what? In one case, the financing company said, this is one of the clearest reports we have seen. It was a thin report that we published, not many pages. It's not a heavy weight. But we said clearly that, Dr. Samal is the CP here, but he couldn't make judgment on in the price of the commodity. We hired a mining engineer to do that, and I have to name them because I'm relying on his expertise, clearly stating that. And uphold the principles of transparency and materiality and competency. Please, competence we disclose in our CP certificates that we do, right? And also, this is probably becomes your heavy thing that you enable balanced reasoned investment decisions. Our reports become the basis for investment decisions. When I take it very personally, when I sign up on a CPA report, if a project comes to an area, take that large copper process and leaching process coming from in Arizona, eastern side of Arizona. When these projects come, all the CPs signing on those, they contribute to make the success of those projects. Those projects come and those cities actually flourish. You should take pride. It happens because of me. Okay, we take the responsibility. The responsibility of the CPs are not just reports. I intentionally make the same text in both of the slides. It becomes actually your role, and your role becomes your responsibility. One of the examples here, again, is actually I sourced it from late Dr. Harry Parker, and Harry actually generously allowed me to use his slide. He shows that when you're reporting a resource, please, he went actually even further, which I don't do. I don't name myself under this table. I name it somewhere else. He says, okay, clearly say that. Name yourself, and please tell the people when they're reading these numbers, they should be looking at who is writing and what kind of assumptions were there. For me, it's not just a report. These things become very important. Basis of those of those numbers. I think that's all I have now. Aaron, the floor is open to take questions.
Thank you, Abani. I appreciate you giving us your time and expertise today. I'm going to kick us off with a question that's not directly related to what you were talking about, but I think is still one that we might benefit from. As we see increased demand for raw materials globally, I kind of have a two-part question. One is, are we seeing more demand for people to fill these competent person, qualified person roles? And do we see that putting additional pressure on existing competent persons to potentially try to turn reports around more quickly? Are we seeing that kind of demand and that kind of pressure?
I think, in briefly, both questions answer is yes. But also it puts more questions actually, which I'm facing, on a regular basis. The commodities that we are dealing with now, they may be newer to the some CPs. This is where, for an example, lithium. I am not a CP for the lithium that is coming from McDermott. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not consulting with them. They're all in my network. We talk about it, but I said I cannot put my name because I don't have experience on the style of mineralization. For lithium from granites and granite rocks, yes, because I have worked on the style of mineralization. So it's time again. The time, your second part of the question, the pressure, the CPs and the owners of the properties and the project, they should understand what the required qualification. Lithium is a newer commodity, Aaron, right? Doesn't mean that we don't have, we cannot have the CPs sign up. Experience is based on the style of mineralization. If you have the style of mineralization, please take time. And Aaron, if I signed up on a project like that, I would disclose that this is my past project in nickel or let's say lithium, but I have worked on this granitic project in blah 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 other areas. Yes, there is definitely pressure, but I think there's an opportunity for education also.
Excellent. I do see that the link for the quiz for those of you who are getting CEUs for New York, that has been dropped in the chat. So if you are ready to take that, you can click on that now. This question comes from Brad Radloff. He says, it's not entirely clear what it takes for a resource to go from indicated to measured. I mean, is it more borings? Is it sampling? Or can it be something else? And I will add to that, or does it really depend on the style of mineralization, the kinds of analyses that it takes to move from indicated to measured?
Very good question. Very, very good question, actually. I'll give you the Brad one example. I forgot which one was this, but I think it's a Timmins Station in Canada. We did this reserve audit and signing off from one of my previous employers. In that project, we agreed with operators that we will not have major resources, and in operating mine already, and it didn't have major resources, but that means they don't have any proven reserve. But do I need a proven reserve to operate a mine? No. But the beauty of that project example is that the investors or the operating company, if they're investing, they understand the project is running under certain risk. See, when you have a probable resource and you cannot have proven reserve, so probable reserve to proven reserve, that means you have a higher level of risk, right? But that means you understand the risk profile. And we clearly say, okay, you're running a project, you're earning money, that means you have a track record, that's fine. But you understand the risks in here. We cannot sign up on the making any part of the resource and a major resource. In a newer project, Brady, that is what you're referring to. When you go from from indicator to major resources, as CP, make sure that you understand when you declare the major resources, you are giving very high level confidence. Drilling may be important, but in addition to drilling, what we should look at is that continuity that we are proving for resource that can be converted into reserve. Remember RPAA criteria, the mineability criteria. I'll give you one example, very large project in US. When I looked at it, part of the project, I said, well, you are talking about so much indicated resource, and part of that will be actually measured in the future, for sure. But now, to put the RPAA criteria, that means you should be able to mineable. To mine that much, we're talking about 1 billion tons of material over 25 years or something, you have to have a tailing pond. What is your land for tailings? We're talking about resource. What is the land for tailings? I knew that land was disputed. I mean, we discovered that land disputed. On that basis, we said, we'll be better off declaring all that as inferred resources today. Please work with the land guys. Guess what? 10 years after, I think it's 10, 12 years now, after that project has the land now. So it's always good thing, to take time, educate the client, educate the project, and work on those things. You'll see that your project is more successful. Don't rush. I think that's my message here.
Okay. I did see a couple of questions about the availability of the PowerPoint. Dr. Samal has generously agreed to make this available to our members through our members website. So you would have to log in to get a copy. If you're not a member of AIPG, you'll need to reach out to Dr. Samal directly, or you could become a member. Either of those options is going to be perfectly acceptable. Mark Davies has asked if a property has to be owned or leased if you're going to claim a resource or a reserve.
Ask the question again. Can I rephrase it?
Yeah, does a property, does it have to be owned or leased if you're going to claim it as a resource or a reserve?
As long as you show you have ownership and access to the property for the duration of the time that you are proposing to mine, you will be fine. Like the BLM lands, we lease the land from the BLM to operate it. So you show the document to do that. These large projects in I'm not taking the name, but I think you can guess it. In Arizona, they're all leased lands, not a problem. But when you have patented land, probably it gives more confidence to the investor. I don't see any difference in those two scenarios.
I see a question from Russ Patterson. I'm not exactly sure what Russ is getting at. I'm going to go ahead and read it off, and then maybe we can talk through it. Russ asks, if there's a limited market the resource outside what may be sold is not a reserve. I think what he's getting at is when the market's limited, if you have more material than the market can bear, does that qualify as a reserve?
Go ahead again, Aaron, please state that.
I think what Russ is getting at is when you have a limited market and you have a large resource, if you have more material than can be sold, does that count as a reserve at that point?
You have more material than sold.
Yeah. So if you've got maybe a lithium prospect comes on and it's going to sort of swamp the market, how do you deal with that in terms of resources and reserves?
You know what we're dealing with now is a very interesting question, Aaron. And who is that? Who wrote that? Rose, right?
Russ Patterson, yeah.
Yes, very interesting question. I'll give you one example. You know how much molybdenum that Bingham Canyon can produce? I'm not saying they are producing.
I have no idea.
If they wanted, there's only 2 mines in the in Americas. They can flood the moly market. They don't. There is a demand and supply that we all go through. You know, current time, actually, this is the right time. We always look at what is the demand for the commodity. Okay. So when you have a large deposit, you don't mind them. You own it. You don't mind them. See, mining is not a non-profit work unless it's a wartime where the government puts money to mine tin and cobalt and those kind of things. Mining is not. Mining is a profit-making industry. Okay, we always have to have NPV greater than 0. To meet the criteria, you have to have a mine plan that produces enough to make money. Good question, Aaron. Just think through, you'll get the answer.
Okay. I also see a question from Christopher Kravitz, and I think the answer to this is probably going to be fairly straightforward. He asks about being unclear on QP-CP requirements, stating that when he repaired NI 43-101s, the QP must have a degree in the discipline, such as geology, not necessarily experience. I can answer that at least partly because in terms of QP-CP, if you're required to be a member of a recognized professional organization, those professional organizations are only recognized if they require a degree in the discipline. So I think that requirement has been implied throughout, but maybe you could help us clarify that a little bit, Dr. Samal.
The 3 parts of the QP qualification. First, you have to have a degree. Like I said, there are only exceptions. I've seen, 3 or 4 people in my whole life. I mean, this is my 24, 25 years in the industry. But the educational qualification is the first requirement. Like I said, one example I gave you is a mechanical engineer becoming a CP for reserve. Another gentleman here, he lives in Reno. He's a geologist for signing up for reserve because he has a substantial experience in mine planning. I've seen one other person in Tata Steel in India, geologist signing for reserve because he has substantial experience there. But basic qualification for reserve is actually you have to have a mining engineering or geological engineering or equivalent qualification. For resource, you have to have the relevant experience here. A mining engineer can be a resource a CP for a resource too. No one stops them. You have to have a relevant educational qualification there. Now, our mining industry have accountants. Can they become a QP? Right? If you look at the second part of qualification becomes like what Aaron said, you go to the AIPG requirement for CPG, you have to have 35 or 40 something. I think CPG requirement for AIPG is the maximum number of hours required in the entire world. Let me clarify that. So becoming a CPG is not a joke, okay? And it is not difficult. I'm not saying that. It's not a scare tactics. Actually, it is very, very robust. So if you have become even an accountant, but you took actually that 40 credit hours of geology, please prove it. So these ROPOs like AIPG, SME, they will look at your transcripts. The third part becomes your experience, relevant experience. Okay, like I said, I clarified it again and again. Experience is actually on the style of mineralization. Like I said, I've not signed off on a lithium project. I will not be qualifying for clay type of deposits, but granite type of deposits, yes, I can. Okay, so it depends on the style of mineralization. So these are three parts to the qualifications. Okay, is there a clarify, Aaron, enough?
Yeah, and just for clarification, for AIPG, it's 36 hours of geology courses or 54
36,
quarter
okay.
hours, depending on how they're measured. We have two more questions, and I think we'll probably stop after those. The
Okay,
first
fine.
coming from Boleth Sebastian. Boleth says, you mentioned that RPEEE factors are essentially assumed modifying factors. Does that mean that in order to report resources, one needs to take into account the same factors as for reserves, but on more of an assumptive basis?
I would say it's not exactly that, but it's kind of, you are getting there. Okay, this is really, I don't have a black and white type answers, but you are saying it's mostly right. So for an example, community relationship, where when I sign up on a resource these days, we require someone to look at the ESG criteria. One of the things is governance, it's society. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here, they have not established that, but they have a plan to establish it. When we go to reserve, it becomes actually, it will become more and more stringent in coming years, that the CP takes a responsibility of making sure that that the social criteria is taken care of. You are there actually, but there are certain criteria in the reserve, I'm blanking now actually, the most stricter, depend on the reporting style too. Who was this gentleman actually, Aaron? What's his name?
That asked the question, that was
Oh, Bolat. So Bolat,
Boleth, yes.
actually, see, here's an example. I think you should look at under which jurisdiction you are actually signing up. If you are in SME, sorry, SK 1300, and you are signing up on the resource on a newer project, please look at the criteria for they require for recoverability, which is different for NI 4311 and JORC. Okay, the CPs in the United States actually constantly, actually not personally myself, by we I mean the community in the United States, constantly talking to SEC about it. So go by criteria and see. I think you are mostly right, but it's not exactly translatable. There's one
Well,
from Bob saying, how do you typically handle the uncertainty of risk? For example, historic drilling may be uncertain quality, could be sketchy. Oh, yeah, it's such a wonderful question, Bob. See, when that is historic data, first thing I look for is the survey data. Okay, not like the assay. Everyone jumps for assay. I look at the location of the data. Guess what? Recently, right now, I'm working on a project. I wouldn't disclose more than that. I'm asking these guys that, how do I know your location of the data is fine? They're saying, okay, we have assay certificates for 10-15% of the data. I think, okay, that's another question. That's next level. Is the location of the drill holes trustworthy? From this project where I'm working now, Robert, I think within 50 miles, I had a project last year. These guys had a similar problem, but they had a surveyor. He's like, I wish I could work with him to write a publishable paper. That good quality of survey these guys had. But that project, when you look at the old holes, Bob, what we're missing there is the structural control. They just put everything mineralized, nothing structural in there. Come on, this is a porphyry copper, man. Exists a small porphyry copper in Arizona. I know, I can see actually there are two major structures. Visibly you can see it. If your eyes are tuned for copper deposits, right? So it's kind of, Bob, you and me need to have a 1 hour discussion on those type of things. There are multiple items I have actually, I have kind of made a list of looking at this thing over the years. You should be talking about it. And Bob, feel free to drop an email to me, okay? We should be discussing that in another time. Is that fair, Aaron?
yeah, absolutely. And I did see Austin Gilmore drop one more question. Let's go ahead and address this one, then we'll call it good for today. He asked if you're dealing with economic analyses when you're talking about a 30-year return on your investment. How do you deal with pricing when commodity futures only go forward a couple of years?
Oh, Austin. Again, I think I took this. I asked the question to kind of push you guys to think about what kind of commodity you are looking at. Okay. If I ask you, can you predict me my investment in lithium for next year? Is it safe? Okay, ask yourself that question. And next question, If I have that $1,000, can I buy the this partial stock of Barrick next year or any gold producer? And what is your confidence on actually putting that money on an iron ore miner or copper miner? Why will you be actually confident? It all in your brain, what we're thinking about, how predictable these commodities are in the nearby future. Like I said, we the humans making decisions, our scale is actually our lifespan. We can only think about our grandkids, isn't it? If we go beyond that, we don't know, we don't care. So this is a very relevant question. I always actually, when I consult with or advise financiers, this is how I address it. Please look at all the technical data and ask for wherever you see there's a big projection, please ask for clarification. Maybe they have a justification. On the other side of the fence, when I have a client, I'm advising that they're trying to pack up a project to sell. Guys, make sure that you open up all the books that you have. Don't leave any ambiguity because it's going to come and bite you back. So it's a very relevant question, depends on commodity. And another last thing, Austin, where this project is located. I said that I worked with World Bank in 5 years project, working on the iron ore project in Nigeria. But are they getting an investment? That's a good question to ask. Look at it. The government or the jurisdiction in which this project is located. Silver projects in certain South American countries, very good intercept, no problem. But location is such, you cannot make a project profitable. So all these things come into play actually. Very good question, Austin. Very interesting discussion, isn't it, Aaron?
It's fantastic talk today. I think we could probably spend another hour if we wanted to just doing Q&A. Unfortunately, we don't have that time. I really appreciate you spending your time, energy, and expertise on our behalf, Dr. Samal. I can't thank you enough. And for those of you, again, who are seeking CEUs for New York State, that link is in the chat. It'll be open for another 45 minutes or so. Just remember, you need to get 4 of the 5 questions correct, and you can take that as many times as you would like. I appreciate everyone, and thank you very much for attending today's webinar.